about, but before I talk, I want to thank this organization. I think they've done a wonderful job. What do you guys think? Let's give them a big round of applause. What they've put together with this gentleman and all his group, it's amazing. It's amazing what they've done. And I've been following them, they've been following me, they've been tracking me down, I've been complaining, they've been responding. It's been wonderful. So it's all worked actually very nicely. I'm not about the exterior. I'm about the interior. I had a very long period as a fashion photographer. I don't know if I have to make excuses for that, but I enjoyed it very much. Girls, money, and telling a lot of lies. What more could you do? I mean, it's incredible. So now I think I've become a serious photographer. It's a horrible thing to say, because, but I do think in this latter part of my life, if I were to see myself still as a fashion photographer, it would be rather, especially in this moment where this Me Too moment is rather dangerous, I'm glad I stepped out. So at this point, I'm photographing heritage. Heritage in the sense as a metaphor for a series of worries that I have, which will come out. Poetics of space doesn't need much more of an introduction. Inhabited space transcends geometrical space. Why am I reading this? Most people say, don't read what's up there. Because I want you to meditate on the words that are up here. If you want me to read them because you like hearing my voice, I will. But if you don't, you can read it on your own, okay? I normally do for my students, but since you're such an elevated and cultivated group, I'm a little afraid. Next slide. Or are they going to do it, or am I going to do it? They should have given me a clicker. Oops. Okay, where does my interest begin? As a young child, I was taken to all the possible museums in Italy because half of my life was spent in Italy. I was born in the United States, but I culturally developed in Italy. My grandfather used to drag me around from museum to museum to museum. And one of the images that struck with me and that I've come back to every time is St. Augustine in his study by Carpaccio. Why? And why is it so relevant now? First of all, from a photographic point of view, the centrality. The idea of encompassing everything in one image. Animals, study, information, meditative quality, all of these elements come in, and they have formed the base of my way of looking at things now. I use this every time I get confused in looking at a space, I come back to this. So I'm showing it to you, I'm sharing it with you, as this is my platform that I leap from. There are some words too that I'm going to share. Oops. They've changed my font, I'm sorry, but do I need to read it or do you read it? For our house is our corner of the world. As it has often been said, it is our first universe, a real cosmos in every sense of the word. So what am I concerned about? I'm concerned about the house. The house as it encumbers on us and how it surrounds us. The house shelters daydreaming. The house protects the dreamer. The house allows one to dream in peace. Dreaming and photography are very much linked, except the photographer has the difficulty that he has to start with what exists. The painter has the luck of an empty canvas. The house is one of the greatest powers of integration for the thoughts, memories, dreams of mankind. It is a body and soul. It is the human being's first world before he is cast out into the world. This wonderful French philosopher was philosophizing half of his life about mathematics. All of a sudden, like me, he started getting enamored with space. I don't know what happened. I haven't read the details about his life, but his words are a base for me to reason about most things, especially the work that I do now. A house that has been experienced is not an inert box. There are a lot of inert boxes out there that people have to live in, but it should not be that way. Inhabited space transcends geometrical space. That was the beginning of that was the title. How accurately must one hear in order to hear the geometry of echoes in an old, peculiarly experienced house? That's where I want to begin this logic. These are the words that underpin what I'm going to show you now. Wait. Yeah. No, don't read that. Don't read that. Just stay there. Because there's a film that has to be shown back there. And I'd have to run through the slides. My first project when I came to India, and it's at the end of all the slides, I don't want to show you everything, was on Pondicherry, a city that you must all know. And hopefully you've all gone to. If not, please do, before it becomes a smart city. A horrible smart city. I hope none of you as architects are working on smart cities because they're dumb cities. And if you come to Pondicherry, I am a smart city terrorist. And if I see you, boom, boom. No smart cities. You have such wonderful older buildings. You have such wonderful heritage. Do not make the mistake of many European cities, of many American cities. Forget the Americans, those are the wrong example. The European cities that forgot that they had heritage. And all of a sudden they had to backpedal. Oh my God, what are we going to do? We're going to lose the tourists. But it shouldn't be only on that level. It should be on an enormously broader level. And I hope some of these words help to create that sense of responsibility that is for you architects or for those who work in heritage, intact, and everybody else decline. My job at this point in my life is to give my time, because I have the time, and luckily I'm not dependent on the money that I make on my books. So what do? I go to Intac and I say, listen, I've seen this and this and this and this and this and this in this house. Can we work together? I want to get inside. I want to tell the story. That's how I did with Pondicherry, of which now, hopefully, if they hear me back there, they'll show the film. This is the film that shows some of the images of the book. Can we have the first film on Pondicherry, please? And douse the lights, please.
Some things are just pictures. They're scenes before your eyes. Don't look now. I'm right behind you. Some things are just pictures. Don't look now. I'm right behind you.
Okay, now what was the function of this book essentially, besides the fact of pleasing me to take photographs? It was to join city planners, architects, owners of houses, and the politicians that didn't show up at the launch of the book. My attempt at looking at heritage is not so much to please myself in taking the photographs, even though I enjoy them very much. It is to create an event, to use the book as a stimulus for a conversation. And, as has been done in Europe, and I think it should be challengeable that now it should happen, here, each city should begin to love itself, to begin to look at itself, to hire photographers to come and look at the heritage, to look at the vernacular architecture, to look at the beauty that is there. That what is photography. We saw this wonderful presentation of the history of Indian photography in India. It was looking at dilapidated buildings in a way. And it was gratifying those that were doing the uncovering. This is not supposed to do that. This is supposed to initiate a discussion among the alive people that are there, that have to, from the age of 10 to the age of 90, make a decision of what they're going to keep and what they're going to allow to be taken down. Because it should be a logical and very thought out process that the community makes a choice. That's what happened in Europe. In Europe, in Italy especially, that shares the same kind of situation that India does. It has so much that it can afford to throw it away. The Italians lived that way. And all of a sudden they realized, And it's a bit presumptuous to say this, but I think that consciousness has to be, and I'm teaching students of photography to become observers. Forget clicking. It's what's ticking up here and why you're ticking. So each process of observation should have, I think, if you can, a political end in some way. Slightly, but it should carry itself forward. After having finished Pondicherry, I set my sights on something else, but normally these things happen in a holistic way. Somebody comes and tells me about another place. And I was working with a photo editor that was doing a collaboration with the Oberoi, where I unfortunately at times have to earn money, so I photograph their hotel rooms. Horrible job, but I have to do it. And she said, listen, I'm a Bori Muslim and I come from Sidhpur. And I said, where's Sidhpur? Go, I'll give you the house, you go and stay and you take a look. I went, I did a 8-page article for a magazine, and then I say, will you put me up for a month? And she said, of course. And another wonderful project, and another saving of homes. The Pondicherry book saved 3 homes. The Sidhpur, only 1 for now. But at least the Sidhpuris that are rather tight with money started thinking, well, if this crazy man can come in this dusty place and look at our homes that we only look at once in December for the weddings, maybe there's something to be saved. So the attention from outside created attention on the inside, which created a dialogue. Can we see the other movie, please?
I've always been interested in cities or towns or realities that have fallen off the grid, that have somehow been left behind by history, somehow been lost to the trend of modernity. And that's what I found in Sidhpur. Sidhpur has this very, very curious atmosphere. There are 2 streets that seem to be a lost film set, a film set that was somehow moved from the interest of the production and left. And as you begin to walk around and you begin to examine, you see patterns, you see amazing sense of urgency of a people that had for a moment, a small moment of time, etched their existence both inside and outside the houses. As you begin to open the doors, as I began to go inside, the memories of each individual family presented themselves to me. Whether it was through a photograph, a use of an architectural identity, a use of a color, a use of certain materials, everything spoke of an intention of a people that had traveled far and wide and brought back through either the emotion of acquiring or the emotion of sharing or the emotion of building up their social status, an enormous amount of baggage that was and is and may continue to be their life. All of these elements are part of this 2-dimensional story that I'm talking about. It was 3-dimensional for me, but it becomes 2-dimensional in the moment that I photograph it. The approach to the photograph is distant, but at the same time detailed. I frame elements that attract me, but I try not to interpret. I try not to be, how can I say, exceptionally coy in the way of looking at it. That's why I try to be as flat as possible in my approach, allowing that the house in itself, the recording process, be neutral. My neutrality is all about trying to let those signs that appear on the walls, those signs that appear in the colors, emanate in a process that is as natural as possible and as neutral as possible, even if photography is never neutral, even if my observation is never neutral. Inspiration comes along the way. Inspiration comes as the discussion evolves. Inspiration comes as I open each individual door. The process of recording is a lengthy process, and at times involves going back to the same location several times. But the process is one that normally only verifies itself once I have finished looking at the images and identifying those particular moments that make that house, that image special, and that becomes part of a completion which is then put together and compared to other moments. Only then do I have a verification that the inspiration has come together with the intent. The influence of literature has always played a large part in my process of observation. Writers like Max Sebald, Orhan Pamuk, and William Dalrymple, for the specific Indianness of his observation, lend themselves to me as guides, as ways of interpreting that historic process which is unfolding in books and which in front of my camera becomes basically a pageantry which I, as a photographer, have to capture and try to, how can I say it? It's just more of a process. There's not only observation, but it's also recording through the sense of that existence which I hear. I hear the walls begin to sort of talk to me. And as the walls talk to me, I try to do as the writer does, and that is filter that information and then symbolize it through the photographic approach. And in that sense, yes, literature is very important for me. Literature offers me an understanding, sometimes not necessarily of the specific place, but offers me an understanding of an approach, a synthesis, a concern, and beyond the simple concern, also the psychological and physiological concept of what it means to be a narrator of other people's lives. I guess it can be said that at times it could be easy to fall into a Orientalism or the trap of Orientalism as a Western observer, but I don't think that that's a label that could be in any way attached to my process of observation. My process of observation is much more neutral. And second of all, I'm physically living in the country and trying to use my research and my observation of the past, of lost traces of the Indian past, as a metaphor for the concern of the current process of modernization. Modernization seems to be quickly erasing the past, seems to be quickly evading the important question of heritage, which is a concern that I have very much. My concern of heritage is not one simply of wanting to hold on to the past, but it is a concern that comes from having lived in Europe for a long time, where we have seen the acceleration of modernity cancel out entire regions, or worst, simply contaminate entire regions and make them almost inaccessible through that opaque way that modernity has of quashing, of redimensioning the importance of certain architectural, interior, and also specific aspects of ritual. All of these things come into it as I begin to observe, and that's where the viewer comes in. The viewer has to then take from the inspiration. It can be a simple thing like a reference that they see, a photograph that reminds them of something that may have been visible in one of their own living rooms, in one of their own moments where maybe they went to the old country house. And that reference, seen in a totally different context, seen in a context of somebody else's existence, may lead them into a concern that is not only aesthetic, but it is also a concern about a sense of process, that process which is history. And who says that the acceleration that modernity pushes us to is the process that we want to follow? With this, I'm very much for the scientific process of modernity, but I'm rather worried about the influence that modernity has on completely eclipsing the past. As a nomad who has lived in many different continents, and different moments, historical moments, have sort of encroached on me, I began my process of understanding maybe in the context of the United States. The United States is the country by definition that has encapsulated that crushing feeling of modernity. And that, probably at that moment, I became aware of the dangers of that word, and also of the rapturous joy that one has when one feels that acceleration. So these two things, the danger and the rapturous joy of acceleration, and these two have to somehow be mediated. And that mediation came to me because I also have a very European background. On my mother's side, the Italian influence, and nothing can be said more importantly about Italy than its dangling between the past, the present, and the future. Its past being a very heavy element, a very significant element, a very poignant element of its history, of which each citizen is referencing constantly, either through the food, through the language, and through the architectural experience. In a country like Italy, you find that feeling of belonging to a past held very strongly, and I think that is very similar to what you find in India. And that has helped me a lot to try to interpret certain considerations, and actually given me license to accelerate the process of raising flags of awareness as heritage is involved and how heritage should be looked at. From there, I think that in the context of Sidhpur for me is a metaphor for all my experiences. Why? Because the Bora Muslim trader was probably the most modern figure that existed in that community, in that sphere, in that geographical element, because he was brave, he moved far, he used modern methods of communication in terms of that which was available at the time, and he brought back the influences that he found far away. His homes, the homes of these merchants, become a reference, a very quick reference of the contamination. They do not hold, how can I say, locked their own personal life in the house, and the outside world does not come in. The blending of the two things is so visible. We see the influences, and that is a very modern point. So the metaphor of modernity and the concern from the past and the religious concern for ritual are all caught up in the houses of the Sidhpur that we find in Sidhpur, of the Bora Muslims, specifically of the merchant class, a merchant class that was both in travel, in transit, and at the same time brought back to the house those references in the private intimacy of the house, those references which came from outside and then became integrated into the domesticity of the home. That is what I'm trying to use as a metaphor for a concern for a contemporary India. And those who have sort of the poetic references to listen to this, I think can probably enjoy the observation that I'm making and taking it in the two-dimensional joy also of observing photography as a tool for thinking of the past.
Well, listen, thank you for listening to an old nostalgic. Somebody's got to do it, and I've decided that it's my role to be a nostalgic. So you've got plenty of modernists, you've got plenty of people projecting themselves in wonderful Sahadi curves, so I look the other way. Somebody's got to do it, and I'm the one. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.